Well, hey, everybody, it's Wes McDonald here on this lovely June 21st, coming into the summertime. And really super excited to be here today. Although, after speaking with my guest, I am thinking a little bit about fishing, and maybe that'll happen this afternoon. But I can't thank everyone enough for tuning into another episode. And just for folks out there that are watching, remember, we love to hear where you are watching from. So I'm joining you from the shores of Lake Erie. Once we bring our guests in, I'm sure they'll share where they're watching from and joining us from as well. And unfortunately, Kenneth Edmonds is on another cruise. Sometimes you do see him disappear from these shows because he's obviously somewhere else in a boat. But we did get a chance to speak with him a few minutes before the show, and he wanted me to say hello to everyone joining in. So if you are joining in, let us know where you're watching from. And, you know, one of the expressions that you often hear is there's no I in team, right? And I think after today's interview, you might change your mind on that. So very fortunate to have Brian Smith, founder of IA Business Advisors, in on the call today, author of quite a few books. And in our conversation, it looks like he's going to be up finishing another one very soon. So without further ado, Brian Smith, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us. And I do love this whole concept of the I in team, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And to let everyone know, again, if you do have some questions, come on in. And it looks like we have Guy Warzel in from Ocala, Florida. And thank you very much for coming in. And good morning from Calgary from my mom. Hey, Mom, I love you. And I love that you're my number one fan on the show. And just to let you know, Brian, that she has not missed a single episode, right? So you can't beat a mom like that.
No, you can't. That's amazing.
So thanks for joining in, Guy, and for Mom and for anyone else, just continue to let us know where you're watching from. So I said I'm on the shores of Lake Erie. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Elgin, Illinois, which is about 30 miles from Lake Michigan.
Yeah, that's great. We were talking a little bit before the show about the big waters that exist kind of in this area, right? So between Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Simcoe, the amount of water that we have in this part of the country is absolutely phenomenal, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it allows us some really good exits and positive influence for the other side of our lives, which is, our balance, if you will.
Yeah, so important, right? And that's one of the things I think that we're all much more aware of and try and take more care with. I think in this modern age of business is to make sure that we're doing that, right?
Yes.
And when you are talking about that personal side of your business, you're talking about the person, right? About the things that you do outside of the world. And that really is about the I, the person. And maybe we can talk a little bit about this concept of the I in team and maybe why it's a little bit different than a lot of people think when they just listen to the truisms.
Yeah, a lot of us or any of us that were in sports have been told there's no I in team. And I understood what that meant. You've got to embrace the entire team. It's a play on words for us because the I in team is not just myself individually. And for us, individual means more than one thing. The individual, me, when I act alone, you could think that I'm being selfish or only acting for myself. But like right now, West, when you and I are together with this group of listeners and watchers that you have, we are ourselves individual. We are a group of people who represent a common interest, a common focus, and a common destination. And so we are individual. And what we teach is that's the I in team. It molds itself. And what comes from us together or individually myself is our influence. And that's really the true I in team is the influence we have singularly and as a group or a team, depending on which area of influence we find ourselves.
Yeah, and I agree how important the people are, right? And I think this boils down to, kind of a cultural thing. And when I work with a lot of organizations and you talk about kind of their core values or, what their culture is, some organizations are very much there is no I in team. You got to, follow the credo and do the things. And certainly there's people that are good those environments. The way that I work, I love to have that individual contribution, both from myself and from others in a group setting, right? And people think I'm crazy, Brian, but one of the things I love the best is strategic planning at the end of a quarter, right? When we get together for 2 days and there's a bunch of people around that table that are building kind of what the future year ahead looks like for that organization, right? And it's the ability to bounce ideas off other individuals and watch this organic thing that happens, with that, team because of those individual contributions, right? So is that kind of a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, it is. You can't be your best for your team if you're not first your best for yourself. And if you take on best for self uh, as a goal to be your best for your team, then the I in team falls out. The influence you have individually and as a group, as a team individually, is more enhanced. And if you can bring all these like minds together and get everybody swimming, I don't care if it's upstream, downstream, side stream, in the right direction together, pulling your weight, sharing, and being inclusive, and getting everybody focused on whatever the common destination is chosen. You're exactly right. Powerful things happen in organizations that do that. And the more you can collaborate, the more powerful that influence can be.
Yeah, and I don't think you can collaborate. That's probably a perfect word unless you have individuals, right? Because that's the whole idea of collaboration. Because when everyone is the same, when they lose that I in the team, it's really more about, I would say, what's the word? Mimicry is maybe not the right word, but the idea that you're trying to emulate the same way that everyone else is doing things, right? And
Yeah.
this diversity of thought that comes with accepting the I in team, I think is one of my favorite things, right?
Yeah, we think, inclusion, diversity, and equity are a byproduct of developing the I in team the way that we are teaching it through our work. And it doesn't have to be a primary focus. It just happens organically. And when DEI happens organically, it really sticks. And the definition hits home and you get everybody involved. It doesn't become this pathway of only one group or another. It becomes a pathway for everybody that has influence, which, by the way, is everybody. Everybody does have influence.
Yeah, I really appreciate that sentiment, right? So that there's no individual that has a monopoly on influence. And what I put up here is I've got your LinkedIn profile. So anyone that would like to find you further, obviously linkedin.com/in. I'm not sure why they always have that there, but that's their format. Your biz dr. And obviously also on your website, iabusinessadvisors.com, that they can find you there as well. And what I want to move into next maybe is this idea. Obviously, there's all kinds of influences. We just kind of hit on that point, right? That everyone has the ability to have influence. What about positive influence? Because there are obviously different ways to influence, the carrot and the stick, if you will. Can you talk about the positive influence and why that's important?
I can. It's our belief that our influence is our biggest responsibility as humans. And as you noted, we all have influence. That influence begins before we're born.
Mm.
And when our parents, your mother, found out that you were going to be born, you were already influencing her and the family before you even took your first breath.
Huh.
Positive influence is understanding that you have influence and doing the best you can to have the most positive influence in whatever area of influence you have. I don't care if you're working in a warehouse, if you're programming computers, if you're doing accounting, legal work, it doesn't matter. Your area of influence is obviously important to the people who rely on you. Make it the most positive that you can. We all know inherently, and I know I'm being general, but it's true, what being positive is, what feels good to us, what is good for us and good for the people that we serve in whatever our area of influence is. And positive influence is about that, understanding it and living it and being responsible for it.
Yeah, my dad, used an expression with me when I was much younger. We were actually having an argument about something, and I knew I was right. And my dad stopped because he was obviously older and wiser and said, "Oh, wait a minute. What do you want out of this? Do you just want to be right?" And I said, "I am right." And he goes, "Oh, good. Well, conversation stopped. Where do you want to go fishing tomorrow?" And I was thinking maybe up on Lake Simcoe, and I was infuriated because I'm like, "Dad, you can't just tell me I'm right." And he said, well, if that's what you want, I'm giving it to you, right? And he explained to me later, he said, it's not so much the what of what you were trying to be right about. It was the how. It was very negative, right? And he taught me a valuable lesson. And it's not just the what, because you can accomplish or go after the same thing, but how you do it is so important, right? So maybe you can talk on that a little bit, right? So if we're looking at let's say we run a team, we're a leader for a team, and we need to potentially correct or take care of some behavior that's detracting from the organization as a whole. How can I do that in a positive way?
Yeah, for us, we use SMART. A lot of us understand what SMART goals are, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. We like to teach smart action or smart communication. And one of the ways to get somebody to engage in understanding root cause or root effect is understanding that being smart takes you there in a positive way, being specific about what it is you're trying to do or trying to convey, making sure there's full context for all parties involved, providing measurement. Measurement can be a lot of different things. It could be what you want out of it, how much time it will take, what your expectations are, but providing that measurement. Um, Understanding attainability. Is it really attainable for yourself to do what you're asking or for others to do for you? And the way you understand attainability is to be specific and ask. And then, is it really a good time? Is it realistic? And is it timely? Sometimes what we ask for, it's just not the right time. And so when we push things to happen and it's not the right time, well, that's not smart. And oftentimes that's when we see the most challenges. So we teach that as not only a goal setting platform, but as a way to get tactical and implement the action to reach goals and make sure that we follow that all the way through.
Yeah, and I guess no pun intended, but I think that's really smart because the other thing I feel about that is it gives a structure to that kind of interaction about expectations, so it doesn't feel like you're being picked on, or it's kind of like, no, this is the smart action plan that we follow, and people are aware that they're going to be called on that, and I like that. I think that also kind of gives it a universal playing field for everyone in the organization, right?
Yeah, it's simple. You can ask when people understand that you are working in a smart environment, and you're having a conversation, and let's say the conversation is going sideways.
Yeah.
There's some emotion. Everybody knows if you ask the question, where are we not being smart here? It puts everybody on their heels, and it almost hits, well, in the technical world, the control alt delete button, and hits a reset and gets you back to ground level and lets you restart the conversation and try to build smart from that point. And it really does help balance out behavior, readjust time. I mean, it readjusts everything, and it gets everybody back in the right direction pretty quickly.
I love it. So for anyone watching or listening in today, make sure you look that up. The SMART methodology. I've heard of it before, and just sounds like a great way to make sure that that we're going after the right goals, and B, that everyone has an understanding of what their expectations are in that process. And there you hear the Canadian in me, Brian, the process instead of process.
Yeah, well, you're saying it the right way.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it's spelled. I joke with people all the time that I'll start saying it process the day they start spelling it PRAW.
Yes. That's funny.
Oh, that's great. And let's talk a little bit about individual influence before we get into some of your books. I do want to move into some of that. Let's start with this book, Individual Influence. And I think you said earlier that this was your first book. Is that correct?
Yeah, Individual Influence, Find the I in Team was our first book. And, it started where I mentioned earlier, understanding that our influence begins before birth, and that influence extends until, for many of us, even after we leave this place. And everything we do has influence. You can give a smile to somebody and change a life. It's one of the most simple influences we can give as a human. And yet, it's probably one of the most powerful. There's stories about people who might have been going to end their own life and change their mind because somebody smiled at them. That's all it took for them to change their mind. Kindness matters. Understanding your individual influence and what that means in your specific area of influence is what's so important. And our first book leads you on a journey, and the journey is from my history, um, through difficult childhood, through very bad choices to where we are today. And I don't do it, the book isn't written as a look at me, it's written as a here's some context, now apply it to your own life. It doesn't say you have to do it this way. What it says is this is what worked for us. Here's some ways to be smart about yourself and your influence. Go find your own understanding, find your I in your team.
Yeah, I really like this concept that you bring up as well about the influence that you had before you're even born. I'd never even thought of that, right? And that one of the things that I share with people, especially people that think they're 100%, self-made, if you will, is that a lot of those conditions or influences that kind of allowed us to be who we are weren't really within our, realm of being able to control, right? So where were you born? Were your parents? And hi, mom. I love my mom. She did a great job of, loving and raising her children, right? But influence, even at that point, on how we develop, before we're born, is so absolutely powerful, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't define you, it influences you. And there's a
Right.
difference. And if you look at like my LinkedIn page, I'm not a pronoun guy. It says I, we. That's what I put for my pronouns. I am literally, to this moment, West, right now, an accumulation of every we in my life. Every single interaction, every single person, every single decision that I've made actively, proactively, or reacted to defines, or not defines, but influences me. And I choose what that definition is through the choices I make going forward. And so every book we start with I am we.
I love it. That's one of the things you mentioned on the we side. I always try and share that with my children, right? That when I was growing up, I love my dad, but he was a very quiet man. He was a pipe fitter, steam fitter, didn't have a lot of valuable, kind of lessons in some areas of life, right? And like I said, that's not an insult at all. Just a different kind of person, right? Not a big talker. My mom, on the other hand, always had great talking advice and stuff for me. And certainly one of the things that I think of when you mention the fact that we're not a byproduct necessarily of what we've been through, but that we are influenced by it and how people influence that. I try and teach my kids. I turn this one on its head as well, which is the expression that it's not who you know, it's what you know, how important that feels to people. And I try and express to them that it's equally important who you know, the tribe that you're surrounding yourself with, right? The influence of the people around you in that team, if you will, is really important, right? It's not just what you know, it's who you know. And really that's not saying that they need to know, really smart people or really influential people, but to make sure that the people that you surround yourself with are the kinds of people that you want to have the kind of influence on you that you want, right? So is that fair? Like, should we surround ourselves by people that are positively influential?
I think you should choose the people that are around you based on what you want your life outcome to present for you. If you want opportunities, you got to put people around you or put yourself into groups of people that can give you an on ramp or an off ramp from where you are now into those opportunities you're looking for. If you want to, for instance, be around people who like music, you're going to have to go out and find people who are probably engaged in music in some way, maybe groups on social or going to concerts or things like that. If you go to bars all day long and all night long, you're going to surround yourself eventually and be influenced by people who spend their days in bars. And so, I mean, you could apply that to any human influence that's out there, any interaction that we go through. Ultimately, it's our choice, though.
Right.
If we stay in toxic environments, yes, there are psychological reasons why we might do so. But once we learn that it's toxic, we have a choice to either try to find help for that or just stay where we're at. And it doesn't matter what kind of toxic that is. It can be work, life, friendships, acquaintances, all of the above.
Yeah, and I've always found that in my own life as well, is that you have to really put some deliberate action sometimes into making sure that that circle is sacred, right? That the kind of people that you're, because you will be influenced by anyone that you have in your circle, right?
Yeah, and being intentional is not a fluffy word.
No.
And one of the words we talk about in individual influence is willpower. And willpower is like gas in a car, by the way. It can be weared down. When we are influenced by peer pressure and eventually give in to peer pressure, what we've done is exhausted our willpower, because a lot of us that did bad things said no the first time or the second time or the third time, but we were worn down. Our willpower was worn down. And understanding how willpower uh, is an influential part of who we are as humans is just one aspect of understanding influence and what influence means to each of us.
It is a finite resource.
Yes,
or
it
one
is.
or one at least that needs time to recharge, right?
Yes, it does. Yes.
So for everyone watching, I did pull up your website here that people can go to get more information on some of the things that you do. And I love it here that you do have the What's Smart right up here front and foremost, as we were talking about how that works and how you work with folks about that. You can see a list of the publications up here as well, and any speaking engagements that obviously you'll be engaged in, or if people would like to reach out to you to find out more about how they can get you to actually work with them, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we have a number of packaged speaking opportunities, but we also custom write. We get smart, if you will, with our client, find out what smart means to them in their area of influence, and we can help develop smart discussions, smart workshops, or smart speeches for their area of influence to support them and in what their missions are.
Well, it really reflects everything you've talked about today, which is an individual approach, right?
Yeah, we try to individualize everything. Over our 27 years, we've created this, we call it Biz Vision, as you can see there. This Biz Vision process, and what it does is it gives us vision of our client. And it's not a predetermined uh, conception or understanding for ourselves. Every one of our clients is unique to us, and we treat them uniquely. And our goal is to help them grow organically based on their areas of influence, who they are, and where they want to be in their future.
Well, that's great. And hey, listen, in the interest of time, I would like to move on to the second book that we discussed a bit earlier, Be the Eye in Team. So how does someone be the eye in team?
Yeah, so the path was, once we understand, basically what influences us and how we're reacting to that, we make choices about how we can be a positive influence in our area of influence. For example, I'll give you a quick example. We have a person in an organization that runs a warehouse, and their position was, I'm not the boss. And I had to say to them, look, I may own the company, but when I'm here in your area of influence, I am subordinate to you. You have a responsibility to be a positive influence on me. Make sure I'm safe. Make sure I'm not touching things I shouldn't be touching. Making sure that I understand the rules here. If you ask me to help you, understanding in context what you need from me, I have to follow you. And I need to understand that as a leader, but you need to understand that in those situations, you become the leader, not the boss, but the leader. You become the person who can have positive influence for a moment, for an hour, for a day. It doesn't matter. So positive influence is about understanding that, applying it, and applying it across any area of influence that you as an individual might find yourself, or your organization might find itself.
Yeah, I love this concept that leadership is not necessarily a job title, but it's a specific function when your area of expertise or influence is called upon, right? That in some part of our day, we're all going to be called on to be leaders in some way, right? If it's helping our kids get ready for school, if they need some advice on an exam that they're doing, that we can offer that leadership, kind of that mentorship, if you will, to be able to lead through that. And I think that's so important, because when you look at organizations, the way that they're structured, right? I always love the ones that have kind of, what do they call it? An open door policy, which is like, look, I know I'm the CEO, but if you ever need anything, and I mean it, the door's open if you have a question or whatever. In other words, if you need my leadership, in some way directly, it's there for you, right?
Yeah, we really SMART allows you to teach and to practice a flat hierarchy. And yes, look, I have more areas of responsibility than others as the leader of not just IA, but all the companies that we have influence over, that I have accepted that responsibility for. But when I walk through the door of one of our clients and I'm faced with a receptionist who understands what the rules are for that lobby and what needs to be done for security and signing in, I defer to them. They're the leader in that moment. As I walk through that organization and enter different areas of influence, I have to be understand my situational awareness that, who would I defer to in that moment if I had a question or a comment, so that I build them up and I give them the respect and the understanding that they have that respect, so we can all keep moving forward.
That's great. And on to your last book, and correct me if this is the most current one. It is Positive Influence. Is that correct? Is that
That's
your most
the
recent book?
current book, yeah. Positive Influence Be the I in Team is our current book right now that's out. Yes, that one.
That's great. And nice star review there. So almost a perfect 5. And as you mentioned, I think for about 10 days, you were just on the number 1 spot and then moved into number 3. I think it does bounce around a little bit. So maybe you can talk about, this. It seems to wrap around everything that we've talked about today.
Yeah, positive influence is just, it's the extension of individual influence. Creating stronger teams, being that leader that we just talked about, and accepting it. It's hard for a person who thinks that they have a menial job to look at themselves as a leader. This book helps to refocus them, not just them, but also the people that might inherently think that they are more important than others in the organization. Help them understand why every single person in an organization is a leader and is important and they matter. And our book is designed not just to build up, but it's also to bring people back down, pull people sideways, and help teams to come together and be more cohesive and work together towards that area of influence that they have.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite part of our conversation today is that when you were talking about how people can use positive influence, that everybody has influence, that it was everyone from somebody that's cleaning the gym, floors at a school, or working on an assembly line, or leading a Fortune 500 company, right? That, that really democratizes the value that people have in their influence in their own spheres, right? And yeah, certainly one of the areas. My wife is a retailer, right? She has a small boutique retail operation, beautiful store, and she has so much influence here in the local community. And I remember once somebody said, "Oh, that's nice. She has a lifestyle business, right?" It was almost like, kind of like insulting it, and the fact that it wasn't a real business; it was more of a lifestyle business. And her response to that, will always, be in my heart, because she wasn't negative about it. She said, "Oh, it is a lifestyle business because my life matters more than anything else that could be provided." Right. So yeah, it's just kind of neat to think that everyone has that value. And listen, do you have, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the interest of time, we're just a couple of minutes away. Any final thoughts for folks out there about being the iron team, about increasing their positive influence?
I think bringing up our wives makes me think that the number one piece of feedback we've been getting about positive influence has been our forward. Our forward was written by my wife, Renee, who I've been with now for 33 years.
Wow.
And if you read that forward, which I believe is on Amazon, you can actually read as part of like an introduction. It clearly defines what that entire book is about, and it'll set for you a foundation of what we mean by positive influence. And I think that it best encapsulates our mission here at the I and Team series and at IA Business Advisors, and what we're trying to do with our work in bringing up humans' understanding of their individual influence and their part of individual influence on whatever teams that they belong, and understanding what area of influence they are in and what that means to the present state and where they are going to be in the future.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it. And for everyone watching, you can obviously visit iabusinessadvisors.com, and that's advisors ORS as we described earlier because it can be spelled in different ways. And obviously to be able to find you on LinkedIn as well. And for anyone watching this, you can see it's at Your Biz DR on LinkedIn, and wonderful. And actually, I'm going to make sure that we connect here because we haven't connected yet. So I'm doing that right now. So when you see it come, you'll know. And for all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in today, cannot thank you enough. And remember, until next time, I always say keep learning, but I think I'm going to say today as well, thanks to Brian, be positive.
Yeah. Thank you, Wes.
Thanks, everybody.